Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Hello. Whether you're new to the show or an old friend, I'm so glad you can join us. This is Mission Evolution, the place to find the latest knowledge from today's leading experts. This hour, we'll explore UFOs as myths and myths as real. The concept of UFOs has captured the fancy of many for years. Stories abound of alien abductions and ET sightings. Many eagerly await the great disclosure where governments will purportedly admit to hiding the truth of UFO visits to our planet. Yet to this day, there's no proof positive that ETs have been here or even exist. What are we missing? With us this hour to delve into the ever-deepening mystery of UFOs is David Halperin, the author of Intimate Alien, The Hidden Story of the UFO. David was a teen UFOlogist who grew up to become a professor of religious studies at the University of North Carolina, Capitol Hill. He had a special interest in religious traditions of heavenly ascensions and otherworldly journeys. While David no longer believes in UFOs, they've never ceased to cast their spell over him. The goal of David's research is to understand what that spell has been for him and what it remains for millions of others. His position in a nutshell: UFOs are a myth, myths are real. His website, davidhalperin.net. David, thanks so much for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Gwilda.
It's taken us a while to get you on and trying to dance with our schedules. I'm so glad it's finally happened.
Well, so am I.
So, when did you first become interested, apparently fairly young, in UFOs? What was your interest there?
I was 12 going on 13.
Mm.
A friend of mine and I were going to do an extra credit project for a science class in 8th grade. And we decided we were going to write on life on other planets, which back in the early 60s, life on Mars and Venus were still real possibilities. So we went to, we thought we'd have a chapter on flying saucers, and we went to the public library and we looked in that archaic artifact, the card catalog, to find out what. I don't know how many of your listeners know have ever seen a card catalog, but we looked in the card catalog and there were 3 books on flying saucers. There were there was Jung's Flying Saucers, a modern myth of things seen in the skies. There was one called Behind the Flying Saucers. And then there was Gray Barker's They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. And I took Barker's book out of the library, bicycled home, and started reading it. And before too long, I was so frightened. I wanted to hide under the bed and pray to the God whom I believed in to spare me from the things Barker was writing about. Now, I will not go into a blow-by-blow account of everything in this extraordinary book, but I will say that its centerpiece is the story of how, in the autumn of 1953, 3 men in black paid an unwanted visit to a UFO researcher in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and terrified him into shutting down his organization and stopping his researches. It was a fantastic story, and I believed it. Only in retrospect do I understand why I believed it. And
And I'll
the
bet that's what we're going to get into for this hour, isn't it?
it's why it's one of the things, and perhaps I should hold off the revelation for a little bit, but let us say that I believed in flying saucers because I believed in the three men in black, and I set myself to become the flying saucer investigator who would rediscover the secret that this Connecticut researcher had discovered.
So
And
now you're a professor of religious studies. How does that interface with the concept of UFOs?
well, you have heard the line from the song, Ezekiel saw the wheel way up in the middle of the air, and this is taken from the fantastic vision in the first chapter of the book of Ezekiel, which many have said is a UFO. And by the way, also think it was a UFO, but I don't think UFOs are what people normally think they are. So okay, so that and I found my interest turned toward this. I eventually wrote my PhD dissertation on a subject that was spun off from the vision of Ezekiel.
Do you mind
Ah,
sharing with us, for those that aren't familiar with the Bible, and that's where I'm familiar with the story of Ezekiel there. Not the song, I don't even know the song, but some don't. So what exactly was it about Ezekiel, and what was the UFO that people are saying was there?
in the 30th year, the fourth month, the fifth day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river Kavar, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. I looked, and behold, a great wind came out of the north, with fire flashing up in it. And out of the fire came four living creatures. This was their appearance. They had the appearance of a human being, and they had four faces: faces of an ox, a lion, an eagle, and a human. And then, as I looked upon the living creatures, hard by the living creatures, I saw one wheel on the earth. And as Ezekiel goes on to describe it, the wheels multiply into four, and they're in the sky, and their appearance was as a wheel within a wheel. And those wheels were full of eyes round about. And then he sees above the wheels, above the living creatures, a throne with a human like figure sitting on the throne. And as the appearance of the bow in the cloud on the day of rain, such was the likeness of the glory around it. This was the appearance of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face. That is what Ezekiel describes. And
Sounds like a shamanic journey to me.
I think so. I think so. There's a, and I think, and this is what I mean when I say that he saw a UFO, not that he saw a spaceship, because as your listeners will find out before too long, I don't think UFOs are spaceships at all. But he's had an encounter, as a shaman might, with something in his unconscious, which doesn't, I mean, the we often think, well, if we knew enough about the art of the ancient Near East, and we knew enough about the imagery, that all of this would fall into place. But no, I'll try to speak up. It doesn't. That there is nothing quite like Ezekiel's vision in the art, in the iconography of the ancient Near East. Even the earliest interpreters who tried to, I won't say debunk the vision, but explain the vision in conventional categories, came up short. We have an essay that's preserved in the 10th chapter of the book of Ezekiel, in which an anonymous writer says, oh, what Ezekiel saw were the cherubim, the winged monsters. They're not like what we call cherubim, the winged monsters with human faces who guard the Ark of the Covenant. But if you compare the traditional descriptions of the cherubim with what Ezekiel describes, they hardly fit at all. This is an effort to conventionalize something that is direct from the unconscious,
Isn't it
beyond
also
convention.
isn't
I'm
it
sorry.
also an effort to make it literal rather than metaphorical?
That's a tricky one because I think Ezekiel experienced it as literal.
Yes, for sure.
And and um and if it's a metaphor, we can ask a metaphor for what? And I follow here that although it was although 3 books in our library that got me into UFOs, it was Barker's that did it. Jung's book I could barely even understand at age 12. But Jung, I think, was on the right track, that in discussing Ezekiel's vision, he says that archetypal images cannot be explained. They can only be encountered. So conventionalizations fail. The ancient conventionalization that it's a cherubim, the modern conventionalization that it's a spaceship, because that's the only model we have for the alien, the unknown, something from outer space. So we squeeze and torture the words of Ezekiel to try to get them to describe a spaceship. It won't work. What Ezekiel encountered is something beyond conventional categories. And that is what I think UFOs are.
Would you mind, we're just about out of time in this segment, but would you mind giving us your take on archetypes? What are they?
Patterns by which we organize our thoughts and the images that come to our mind. Jung argued that these are universal to our species, or at least beyond the individual unconscious. He never denied the individual Freudian unconscious, but said that beneath it there is a collective unconscious in which these patterns will emerge spontaneously. And when the
Is this
UFO
collective conscious? Go ahead.
and when the
Go ahead.
flying saucers began to appear, Jung said, wow, this is a myth playing itself out in front of our eyes. And when Jung said myth, he did not mean it as disparagement. He meant it as a term of honor. Wow, it's a myth. Attention must be paid.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And on the other side, we're just about to go into a break, but on the other side, I would like to get into more. Are they all myths, or is there a mixed bag? Are we looking at both, something literal
Yeah,
and something
yeah,
the mythological? So,
yeah.
um, and the book by Jung, what was the title again?
Flying saucers, a modern myth of things seen in the skies.
Fantastic. Well, it is that magic moment. We're going to take a station break. David and I will return very shortly, so don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
Beautiful Mind Coffee is delicious coffee your brain will love. Made with ethically sourced 100% Arabica coffee grown in the volcanic soil of the Tolima, Colombia region, Beautiful Mind coffee is roasted and ground in small batches to ensure each bag contains a wonderful full-bodied artisan coffee. Beautiful Mind coffee contains herbal ingredients to aid in boosting your daily mental clarity and focus. Maca root powder, green tea extract, and American ginseng have all been selected for their ability to support good brain health. Taking care of your brain's health now can help delay or prevent the onset of cognitive dysfunction, including dementia, Alzheimer's, and more general memory loss as you get older just by enjoying the delicious flavor of our roasted coffee and herbal ingredients found exclusively in Beautiful Mind coffee. For more information on Beautiful Mind coffee, visit us online at www.beautifulmindcoffee.ca. Beautiful Mind coffee is now available at amazon.ca.
Hello again. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us this hour discussing the hidden story of UFO is David Halperin. His website, davidhalperin.net. David, as promised, I would like to go into, there's statistically, it's impossible, at least that's the latest, and has been on the books for a long time, that given all even just our galaxy, the likelihood of us being the only intelligent or the most advanced intelligent species is next to nothing. So while you're telling me that UFOs are myth, not literal, what is the likelihood of it being a mixed bag, that there are UFOs that are actually literal and the rest are myths?
I would consider it very remote. I mean, yeah, I'm willing to acknowledge that it's likely that there's intelligent life somewhere out among the galaxies. But think of how long it would take these folks to get out here.
Well, that's by our standards and by what we know of technology. It doesn't mean we are the most advanced in that either. There might be other ways of shortening that. We've talked, even Einstein was talking about shortening time and space through the use of X points and
Conceivably,
wormholes.
conceivably, but this all seems to me so hypothetical that it's hardly worth discussing. The, I mean, the UFOs have been around now for more than 75 years. I'd say around as a cultural phenomenon. Okay, I mean, there were people who have been seeing strange things in the sky as far back as people who looked in the sky. Uh, that we would be having visitors from outer space for these 75 years, and this would have no impact on anything on this planet. That seems to me utterly fantastic. I mean, and to do, many of the UFO advocates have to construct a counter history in which, in fact, the UFOs have made contact with humans. In some versions of the story, they made a contract, a sinister contract with the US government, allowing them to abduct people in exchange for their technology, and so forth. But when you have to rescue a hypothesis by piling more hypotheses on top of it, which run into their own problems. Like if there's a deep dark secret in the government about UFOs, how come that when like these troves of emails have been illegally revealed, how come there seems to be no trace of anything dealing with UFOs?
Well, what's your take, David, on, why you say they're myths, but why are people experiencing these myths as reality? So, say, for instance, the people that believe they've been abducted. complete with probes, of course. But but why? Explain that to me.
I think that they are reporting on some inner reality that is so powerful to them that it blots out their sense of outer reality. I
So a
mean, most,
hallucination?
I think there is. I think hallucinations are operating. Uh, I mean, and some of them are really very, I find very mysterious. I mean, the one that puzzles me the most, to tell you the truth, is the miracle of the sun at Fatima in October of 1917, where a crowd of 70,000 witnessed the sun fall to the earth. Now, you know as well as I do that the sun cannot possibly do that. So, how did these people see it? And it's possible to jump in, as some people do, and say, well, it was really a UFO that they saw. But then there would have been two suns, right? I mean, if there was the UFO, the sun that was masquerading as a UFO, and the real sun, then it would be impossible to ignore the existence of both of them. So I have to say that somehow or another, there had to be some sort of collective hallucination. And I don't know how that would have happened.
Well, it
That to
certainly
me
brings
is
up
the
a
most,
question. It certainly brings up a question of our reality. I mean, we see people gathering in mobs, and suddenly there's this mob mentality, which in effect is a collective hallucination, distorting facts, right?
I guess so. But I don't know that that quite goes the distance toward people seeing or believing they see something that's impossible and having the vision of it at the same time as each other. I mean, simultaneously.
You would think there would need to be some kind of outside stimulus to collaborate for all the same people to have the same hallucination.
Yeah. And I don't know what that would have been. And it still seems to me to remain a mystery how their psyches operated on that stimulus. I mean, when we ask, is UFOs just a myth or is there some reality behind it? There is a there are two ways we can take that. One is the way I think you intended it and the way I responded to it. Are there in fact some sort of alien visitors in the sky? And that I don't think there are. The other is, are there stimuli for UFO? I'm not even sure I want to call them sightings. I'd rather call them either experiences or visions. I like religious language in talking about it. That there are usually some sort of stimuli, like in the case, the very famous case from Papua New Guinea in June of 1959, in which an Anglican missionary and some 25 of his Papuan parishioners saw discs approaching them at close range and human figures walking on the surface of the discs. I mean, yes, there seems to have been a stimulus for this being bright stars and planets seen through clouds that thickened and then dispersed. But what these people did with it, what their minds did with it, that to me is what's extraordinary. And that to me is the UFO.
So
Conceivably is, oh, sorry,
no, no problem. So from what you're saying, then the um, reports of Jesus walking on water or multiplying fish or any of the miracles that he did could fall into the same category.
conceivably, although there we're dealing with the question of transmission of of stories in which it's possible for stories to simply be invented.
Well,
Whereas,
or distorted from one telling to the
yeah,
next, and how many tellings has there been, right?
right. I mean, we've all played that telephone game, but
Exactly.
the, uh, but I mean, here in the UFO encounters, we usually have, the first the direct testimony of people who feel that they've seen something quite extraordinary. And
And what's interesting is they truly believe it. In many cases, they'll pass lie detector tests and everything else. So this has been very, very real. Um, but the thing of it is, the people aren't necessarily the kind of person that has a psychological profile to be subject to hallucinations. How do you explain that?
unless we all are subject to them at some point or another.
Oh, there's that, isn't there? Yeah.
I mean, I gave the case of in my book of a woman who had was worked with a psychiatrist, an American psychiatrist in London, and she had the most vivid hallucinations of her father appearing to her. I mean, and she was by most standards a completely normal, functional person, but she would have this apparition of her father would haunt her, and the psychiatrist was very smart. He didn't try to get her to give up having hallucinations. He tried to teach her how to control them so that she could banish her father. And then one time when her husband was away on a business trip, she created an apparition, which may be a better word than hallucination, of her husband wearing only his underpants, which he proceeded to remove, and they went on to have blowout sex. Now, I don't know what, if I were a fly on the ceiling, I'm not sure what I would have seen. I'm sure I would have only seen one person, but at least her experience was this very concrete, tactile encounter with this this apparition. And the psychiatrist had the really the great insight to say, hey, let's not dismiss these things as pathological. Maybe it's a talent that most of us have not developed.
And that's a very interesting point because regardless of what they are, there's information coming through, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just where it's coming from. It's a see. I believe UFOs are real. Yeah. It's just they come. They're visitors from inner, not outer space, and they can be coming to tell us things that we would not otherwise know.
Are we limiting the concept of inner space by thinking it's just our psyche? What if, like some people have proposed, that there's as huge a landscape as we go inward that then goes out into all that is, as there is as we go outward and connect with all that is?
I've enjoyed playing with such ideas. I don't know I don't know to what extent they're true, but what I do know, I shouldn't say no, what I'm convinced of is that inside, and your listeners are not going to see me tapping my skull, but you can. That inside there is as much mystery as anywhere in the universe.
It's fascinating to me that our limited concept of reality, I think, is at play here, don't you?
I don't know. I'm being very cautious and hedging my bets because I believe that it's important to stay as much as possible within the paradigm that we know and the paradigm that we know to work without insisting it's absolute truth.
That's really important because if you think back, in the biblical times when they would have a vision or an experience, they would naturally interpret it based on the information they had. And
Yeah.
if I understand you correctly, you're saying that now, now we've thought of space age things, we're dealing with the space age. Now we're interpreting those same kind of stimuli according to the information we have and assuming, oh, it's off planet.
Yeah. Yeah. We're conventionalizing it. And there's something, I think there's something beyond it. And to the extent that I can interpret it in accord with what our current scientific paradigm recognizes, I will, just the way people in the 15th, 16th centuries were perfectly justified in not wanting to abandon the Ptolemaic astronomical paradigm of the sun and the planets and the moon going around the earth. It worked. You could do all sorts of cool things with it, like predict eclipses. So you don't want to junk that. It's
Exactly.
on it's only eventually the Copernican paradigm showed that it explained more things. So I am
We're
perfectly
going
free.
I'm
Sorry.
I'm I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're going to have to take another station break. David and I will be right back to continue this fascinating discussion, so you stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
Hi there. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. Our guest this hour is David Halperin. His website, davidhalperin.net. David, one of the things that I find pretty interesting is the UFO community tends to be really invested in conspiracy theories and that there's a cover up. What's your take on that?
Oh, I don't believe it at all. I don't that why leaked emails would not in any way contain any hint of it if it were the kind of extended conspiracy that it would have to be. Just it seems to me utterly implausible. But at the same time, I can understand why people would believe it, because it gives us the opportunity to find out something we didn't already know. I mean, that is a real problem with UFOs, isn't it? They're flying around up there. We're down here. How are we going to have any idea what's going on inside them? During the heyday of the abduction tradition, which was the 1990s, well, yes, we thought we could get to them through the recovered memories of the abductees. But it turned out to be a dead end too. So that the best way to find out about UFOs, to solve their mystery, as it were, is to find out what villainous people are are concealing the truth about them, and force them to fess up. Hence the disclosure, which is endlessly predicted and endlessly postponed.
So now we have very interesting development. We have these surveillance balloons coming over from China, I believe. And that takes us back to good old Roswell. Um,
Hmm.
do you feel, this is just a personal question, but do you feel that the actual cover up was using balloons to cover up, using UFOs to cover up the fact that the balloons had made it here versus the balloons to cover up the fact that they're UFOs?
Okay, I'll give you a quick answer. I don't know. That we do know that something seems to have come down on the ranch, I think about 85 miles out of Roswell, and that whatever it was stirred up enormous interest in the Roswell Army Airfield among the officers there. They issued a press release, which I still don't fully understand what made them do it, saying that the many rumors surrounding the flying disc became reality last week when when a landed disc was retrieved by the intelligence officers of such and such a division through the cooperation of the local sheriff and a local rancher. By the way, it's worth noting they said the press release said landed, not crashed. And I don't know what I really don't know what made them say that, because no matter how you slice it, whether you want to say that it was that the debris came from weather balloons or from top secret mogul balloons, which is a variety of the balloon theory, or extraterrestrial vehicles, it still doesn't cash out to being a landed disc. So maybe, yeah, maybe there was some sort of cover up, but if so, it didn't last very long, because the the evening after the public information officer at the Roswell Army Airfield issued that statement, a general at Fort Worth, Texas, invited reporters and photographers in to photograph himself and other beaming officers next to what's obviously the relics of a weather balloon. So, now, I had the thought that they knew perfectly well that they were dealing with a balloon and that it was of human manufacture, but they didn't know for sure that it was ours. And who knew but that there might be a nest of Soviet spies just across the Mexican border, sending balloons into over our installations. So that's the most I can say about the original debris. Now, what interests me actually more than the mystery of the debris is what becomes of it. That the earliest stage, which I'm describing, there isn't a whisper of the bodies of the pilots. Somehow that enters the tradition sometime before 1978. Most people, I think, don't realize that for nearly 30 years, Roswell was utterly obscure. I think it was Demi Moore. She's the actress who, I think it was her, the most famous native daughter of Roswell, has said that while she was growing up, she never even heard about the UFO. Uh, and then in 1978, the tradition began, and I'm using li- religion religion scholars' words for it. The tradition began to emerge that not only had a disk crashed, not landed but crashed, but that strange bodies, or in some versions not altogether dead, were found in it. And there is where Roswell, to me, becomes exciting. As I put it in the book, it ceases to be a banal mystery of fallen debris and becomes a profound and gripping myth of mortal divinity.
What is the purpose of these myths and who propagates them?
I think I come across two cores to what I think is the UFO myth. One is in straight Jungian terms, that for Jung the circle is the mandala is the archetype of wholeness, the reconciliation of opposites. And Jung saw the flying saucers as our inner mandalas projected into the sky, which I find incredibly plausible because, I mean, aerodynamically, I'm not sure that there's any real function for a flying disc, but as a projection of an image of wholeness, of reconciliation, then it seems to me absolutely plausible.
I
That's
find
let's
it interesting that there's talk of all sorts of different varieties of ETs, and yet there's what, a cigar and a disc, and those are the only two shapes. You would expect there's as many different shapes and presentations as there are races.
Well, yeah, when I was a kid, when I was a teen ufologist, we really had the disc and then the cigars. The cigar was the mothership usually.
So you had
Uh,
both.
yeah,
Hmm.
but since then the triangle has assumed a place of honor next to it. And I really think that it deserves a great deal of investigation. I know one person has written a book on it, on the history of the triangular UFO, which first appeared, as far as I know, in the Hudson Valley in the mid 1980s and became dominant in the Belgian UFO wave of November 1989. And here there is a real possibility that some sort of American aircraft may have triggered these observations.
Yeah, we have some strange looking beasties up there that they've been trying out.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, there is there's now at least three kinds of UFOs. The but I wanted to continue the question of the meaning that the archetype of wholeness or reconciliation, let's call that the sunshiny aspect of the UFO, but I think there's a much darker one. And I think here I can get back to the question of why Gray Barker's book so appealed to me when I was 12 years old. And that is that I think the UFO represents the ultimate alien, death,
Hmm.
which, and that's really why I called my book Intimate Alien, that our death is the most intimate thing for us. I mean, the day we were born, our death was born inside us. And yet it is, at least in my view, utterly beyond our imagining what it
Well, you're gonna
is.
you're gonna have to back up and take me along because I kind of missed the connection between UFOs and it being our death.
Well, look at Roswell. What is Roswell about? Essentially, it's a myth of beings fallen from the sky and being killed. And I think it's that quality of the death, of quality of death, that accounts for why Roswell is the most, the best known of all the stories in the UFO repertoire?
Well, falling from the sky and to one's death almost sounds like incarnation in a certain way, doesn't it?
Oh, that would give it a different dimension, wouldn't it?
Hmm.
Okay. I mean, I'm not, I'm, I'm open to that because I think, you know, that Freud spoke of dreams as being overdetermined. That is to say that whatever we see in a dream has more than one meaning, and the dream's power is that it coalesces different meanings. So perhaps I could see that as incarnation, but then there's details that just won't fit that. Okay, that the creatures that fall are half devoured by animals. Their bodies give off a sickening stench, which almost it sounds like an inversion of the odor of sanctity that the saints are supposed to have.
Well, we think of the fallen angels as well. That's this a similar thing, coming from a higher frequency to a lower one, and having to come from a higher frequency to incarnate into this lower frequency reality, if you will. Does all of that play in there somehow?
I don't know. I mean, what I look toward as prototypes of Roswell is the Greek myth of Icarus, who flies too close to the sun
Mhm.
and his wings melt and he falls, and to Isaiah's Lucifer, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? Thou saidst in thy heart, I will climb up to heaven. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the deepest parts of the pit. And I don't think it's coincidence that this emerges in 1947, or at least the initial germ of it is from 1947, when we're getting used to the idea that it's possible for these hubristic human beings to utterly destroy themselves with their
Well,
weapons.
on that cheery note, we're going to have to take another commercial break. Please stay with us as David and I continue to explore UFOs, myths, and reality. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
Beautiful Mind Coffee is delicious coffee your brain will love. Made with ethically sourced 100% Arabica coffee grown in the volcanic soil of the Tolima, Colombia region, Beautiful Mind Coffee is roasted and ground in small batches to ensure each bag contains a wonderful full-bodied artisan coffee. Beautiful Mind Coffee contains herbal ingredients to aid in boosting your daily mental clarity and focus. Maca root powder, green tea extract and American ginseng have all been selected for their ability to support good brain health. Taking care of your brain's health now can help delay or prevent the onset of cognitive dysfunction, including dementia, Alzheimer's, and more general memory loss as you get older just by enjoying the delicious flavor of our roasted coffee and herbal ingredients found exclusively in Beautiful Mind Coffee. For more information on Beautiful Mind Coffee, visit us online at www.beautifulmindcoffee.ca. Beautiful Mind Coffee is now available at amazon.ca.
Welcome back. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. This hour, our expert guest is David Halperin. His website, davidhalperin.net. David, you've given a pretty convincing argument why UFOs are myths, but myths are real. However,
Gwilda, are you there?
there we go. Can you see me now?
Okay, I see you
Okay,
now.
good. Did you hear my question?
No, I didn't.
All right, we'll start over with it. I said, you've given a pretty good argument as to, indicating that UFOs are actually myths. But why are so many people still highly invested in them being a physical reality? What purpose does that serve?
Because I don't know that you can nourish yourself off a myth while you label it a myth. That you have to, at some level, believe there is truth in it.
Is the concept of UFOs being real? Could it also be a distraction from something that is real that we really don't want to deal with?
Ooh, well, let's take the latest surge of interest in UFOs, which I think has somewhat faded from that in 2020 UFOs were all over the place. Well, this was a time when we really were coping with an alien invasion.
Good
Yes.
old COVID.
Good old COVID. Good
Mhm.
old COVID, which I hope is now more or less eased. But at the time, it was just an unspeakably frightening incursion from somewhere out there. And I think UFOs provided a way, perhaps to distract people from COVID, but also a model for conceiving what was going on with COVID. Because I think that UFOs are conveyors of truth in symbolic language. Now, good. I'm sorry. I don't want to leave your listeners hanging. We set forth a riddle, a puzzle, which was what got me in, why I believed so powerfully in Barker's book, and we never answered that. And may
Well,
I go
that
ahead?
is the full circle of the interview, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is what got you interested and what's your answer ultimately to the riddle?
Yeah, and that is, I believed, as I said, in flying saucers because I believed in the men in black. But why did I believe in the men in black? The answer is that I knew them from personal experience. That in my house there was a terrifying secret, just as Barker described in his book. The secret was that my mother, who we sort of called her a semi-invalid with a heart condition, but I think my father knew consciously and I knew unconsciously that she was slowly dying. But that could not be spoken of. So I knew, and this may be another answer to your question of why we so much want to believe in the cover up. I knew that there were terrible secrets and that these are covered up so that you are, in effect, terrorized into silence. And I couldn't see that in reality. But Barker gave me a mirror in which I could see and cope with that. This is one of what I mean when I say that myths are real, myths are true, contrary to what most people use the word. That this seemed to be beautifully described in the Greek myth of Perseus and Medusa. That Perseus will be turned to stone if he looks the Gorgon face straight in the eye. But if he can hold up a polished shield and see Medusa in the mirror, then he can struggle with it and win.
Very
And
beautifully put, because so much of our lives, we're confronted with things that are too horrific or too forbidden to deal with directly, and yet the trauma of it remains unprocessed. It sounds to me like these myths are a way to bring them conscious enough to start the processing without having to break the taboo.
that is a very nice way of putting it.
So there has been evidence that a lot of the people that had abduction, particularly ones as children, weren't actually abducted by aliens, but rather by an abusive parent in the middle of the night, taken out
Yeah,
of their bed and abused. And the only way they could interpret it or work with it was to see it as an alien, which in a way it was. It was alien to what one would expect or need from a parent. How common do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know. But I think certainly sexual, the heavy and unpleasant sexuality of the abduction stories seems to point to something real and dreadful that the child experienced.
And it might not even come out until they're adults, and then they think they're having this experience as adults, but what they're actually doing is
Yeah,
creating a myth to process the experience they had as children.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Bud Hopkins, the late Bud Hopkins, who was one of the great advocates of the abductions, he hypnotized these people and brought out their memories. Well, he one of the subjects he hypnotized was a woman who, as a girl, had gone on a fishing trip just with her father, and she came back not speaking to her father, and I think her underpants bloodied.
Mm.
Uh, Actually, I mean, having said that, I'm sorry I said it, but the, that it is pretty gruesome. Hop and for She wouldn't speak to her father, and for years she believed that her father had raped her. Hopkins managed to convince her that no, it wasn't her father. It was the UFO aliens who had raped her and whom she should be angry at. Her father was paralyzed or something and stood watching helplessly. Now, I must tell you, to me, there is very little question what what really physically happened.
Whatever prompted him to propose that myth?
Because he had his own theory that that the UFOs beings were hostile, that they were. I think his idea was that they were trying to create a hybrid race of half human, half alien that would take over the world, and to feed into this image, this thought, this idea of the malevolent UFO. It was too good a case to give up, and 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 also once you admitted that in this case it was really a human being who had done the atrocity, then you might start applying it to Hopkins's other cases, and his theory would disintegrate.
So it really brings to the fore how easily we can be influenced into experiencing a mythological explanation for physical happenings and how that can be used to exploit us and the masses, doesn't it?
I think so, as long as we do not lose sight of the reality of the experience. We may distort the details. We may displace details from one person onto another. We may shift the time and the date of the events. I think this is what happened at Roswell, that experiences that people genuinely had in the 1950s were displaced onto 1947. But I think we must, it's not that the memory is implanted, as so many people say. The memory is real, the experience is real, the interpretation
Is distorted.
is, yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Yes. So again, if someone's really good at distorting interpretations, and intuitive enough to read what a person wants to hear and would readily buy into, that gives them a lot of power over our reality, doesn't it?
It can, yeah, it can. Though I really don't think Hopkins or the other abduction researchers were interested in controlling our reality. They saw themselves, I think, quite sincerely as exploring a dark and neglected aspect of the
But they had
reality.
they had their agenda. It was a hidden agenda, probably even to them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I think they
exactly.
were right. I think they were right. I think they were discovering a really important phenomenon. And if it wasn't what they thought it was, then that doesn't make their discovery insignificant. I mean, Columbus didn't know he discovered a new country.
Exactly. So we're running shy on time, and I can't end a program without asking, David, what is your mission?
What is my mission?
What is
It
your mission?
is it is to learn and to teach, to find that which is concealed and bring it out into the light.
And so if you're doing that, then you always have to leave doubt, don't you?
Sure, sure. I do not have all the answers. You could, I could supply you with a list of questions to which I would just have to say, I don't know. I mean, Freud, at the end of his interpretation of dreams, Freud said that every dream has a navel where it plunges down into the unknown. And I think the collective dream that we call the UFO has such a navel. We can't follow that plunge. We can only watch it and marvel.
And isn't that the power and the usefulness of it?
Amen.
So you've said the essential question to be asked about UFOs is not what are they or where do they come from, but what do they mean? Do you have an answer to that?
Well, yeah, they mean wholeness, or they mean death, or they mean both. And and their power may be that they convey both connection and ultimate disconnection.
As a former ufologist, do you believe that there is a possibility or even a likelihood that we will actually see physical in this reality UFOs?
No, no. You will see them by closing your eyes and looking inside.
Well, we are out of time. David, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure having you.
It's been a delight to be here, Gwilda. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad we made it happen. Been worth the time. Our guest this hour has been David Halperin. David is a professor of religious studies and the author of Intimate Alien, The Hidden Story of the UFO. His website, davidhalperin.net. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy past archived episodes, visit www.missionevolution.org. Please be sure to join us right here next time as this mission continues, bringing information, resources, and support to our evolving world.